everybody. Welcome to After the Sermon. This is a Bethany podcast, and we call it After the Sermon, but I know many listen before the sermon.
We keep saying we got to change the name.
I know, but
I think we talked about that for a year now.
You know what we need to do? We need, well, first of all, if anybody has a great idea for a podcast, send it in.
Yeah, title. We'll take a new title.
We'll take the title.
Yes.
But we just need to actually sit down and say we're doing this.
That's right. Yes.
Anyway, Tammy not here this week.
Yeah,
so,
you can tell it's summertime.
Yeah.
Every podcast is a little different right now.
A little bit different. You just never know.
Yeah.
But we're grateful that she has some time with family. And so we are going to do our best to not completely sink this ship.
We miss you, Tammy.
Always. So this week is I'm teaching the parable of the prodigal son. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk about that. And I didn't introduce us, so anybody who, so you're Pastor David Baxley.
Yes.
I'm Pastor Steve Musto.
Yes. Great to see you again.
There you go. Yes. So this is among the two, I think, probably the two most popular parables, along with the Good Samaritan as the other one. So anytime anything from the Bible enters the cultural lexicon, it's popular, right? So you just say that person is a prodigal, and most of the world, whether they've ever been to church or not, knows what you're talking about because of the power of this story.
Well, I think the other thing, I was thinking about that just today, how sometimes, though, the most popular ones that have entered into all of culture tend to be sometimes also the most misquoted or maybe misunderstood.
Yeah.
Because we create meaning outside of their original context in the rest of the world around us.
Oh, that's a good setup, because there are parts of this parable that's exactly true of.
Yep.
And so that's good. So here's how this starts. It's in Luke chapter 15. And I want to read, I don't want to read the whole parable. I can summarize it for us. But what I want to do is read the beginning of how he gets into the parable.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Verse 15 of Luke chapter 1, all the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were complaining, saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them.
Yes.
And so then he told them a parable, and he tells them a parable of the lost sheep. And so this is, you have 100 sheep and one of them is lost. You leave the 99 and go and find the one and bring him back. So let's start here.
You want to start with that? Okay.
I want to start here because I just met with a guy who did his whole doctoral dissertation with Bedouin shepherds.
Wow.
Yeah. And so knows more about shepherding in the ancient world than anybody I've ever met in my life. And it's fast. He's written books and he's written all kinds of stuff on it. And so I got to sit with him and talk to him about this. And he said that there's so many shepherding analogies in the Bible.
Yeah.
And this particular passage is one that people bring up with him a lot when they find out that he's an expert on shepherding.
I would too. Yeah.
Yeah, because what kind of shepherd leaves 99 sheep unprotected and goes and finds, one lost one, and what is the deal with that?
It seems very crazy.
Right. And it's weird. And so, but of course, the takeaway from this is that God cares about those who are lost, those who are not in his kingdom yet. And to the point where he is willing to go to great lengths to reach those and find those people and bring them home. So the answer to that was really, I was waiting for some big, amazing answer. And he's like, basically the answer is this: there's no such thing as a solo shepherd.
Yeah. I was wondering if that's where he's going to go.
Nobody unless you have
by
5
themselves.
sheep.
Yeah.
There's always and with 100 sheep, you've got a team of many shepherds. So it is the chief shepherd is going out and finding the one, but there's still shepherds there watching over the flock.
Which there's even more beauty in that when you think of the chief, the one in charge. He leaves.
Yeah.
Why not send one of the others? He leaves to go, and just his passion and love for that one sheep.
So he also shared a story with us that just was so beautiful. He would ask shepherds as he went from place to place to place. He would say, if you lost a sheep, like let's talk about losing a sheep, and it is. It's the worst thing that can happen to a shepherd is losing a sheep to wolves, to accident, to disease.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, shepherds are constantly touching the sheep, constantly looking at their teeth, opening their mouths, looking at their hooves. We don't think about this. We think of them, I don't know, sitting on a rock someplace playing a lyre.
Playing a harp.
And,
That's right.
But they don't. They're with the sheep. They touch the sheep constantly. And he told the story of a woman who was a shepherdess, and she lost one of her sheep. Could not find the sheep. And she was just heartbroken. And she actually... she would go out and look for it, couldn't find it. And anybody who came through their little town, and this was, probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
Anybody who came through the town, she would say, hey, I have a sheep. Have you seen this particular sheep? And no, I haven't seen it. And one day there's this shepherd who's leading all of these sheep through town. And she calls out to the shepherd to ask him, have you seen my lost sheep? And this one sheep recognizes her voice and pops its head up from the herd and comes racing over to her, and it's her lost sheep. And it's been, they can tell. I mean, it's been tagged and the whole thing. And so, so she gets her sheep back, and this is, a long time later.
Wow.
That the sheep, so there's two parts of it. It's like the sheep hear your voice.
We're going to John in that one right there. Yes, yep.
And the sheep know my voice, and but there's also this, like, she doesn't give up. They never give up.
Yeah.
Many of these shepherds who live hard lives, they remember the sheep they've lost. Like years and years and years later. It's like when I was 13, I remember I lost a sheep once. This wolf came in, and like they can tell you the stories of this. You'd think that this would just be like not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal to them.
Wow. And it goes much farther than livestock.
Yeah.
I'm even, as I'm articulating this going, I don't know if I can relate to that type of, when I think of 100 sheep.
Yeah.
To love one that obsessively.
Yeah.
For that much time. I can't even comprehend that.
Yeah. Yeah, you sort of we would write it off.
Yeah.
At some point. They don't do that.
It's got to be a tax write-off. I got to be able to do that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't think that way.
Yeah, and even as I read right here in verse, 7, there will be more joy in heaven over the one. Mm-hmm. Boy, you hear that story and you can now imagine the joy must have been on her face, as she pops up, she sees the lost sheep.
Yeah.
Years and years later, the celebration that must, what a beautiful picture.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. So the second story he tells then is the parable of the lost coin. Mm-hmm. And he says, if you have a neighbor and they lose a coin, and then they find the coin, they sweep the house, they do everything they need to do. They find the coin, and then everybody's been looking for the coin, because this is something of value. And so then they call everybody who's been looking and they say, it's okay.
Yeah.
I found the coin, and there's a celebration because this thing is precious, and it's the same idea.
Yeah.
So that's story 2.
Yeah.
And then he says, okay, and a man had 2 sons. He goes into story number 3, and he tells a story with which we are familiar.
Yeah.
A younger son comes to the younger of the 2 sons, comes to the father and says, give me my inheritance now. The father does this. The younger son goes off, squanders it on wild living. This is one of those passages of scripture that you got to be careful when you pull passages out of context, because like if you're just talking about money someday and you're like, well, what should we do with money? And you want to pull a passage out of context, we squander it on wild living and on foolish things. Yeah, because that's the only verse you read, right?
That's right. Yep.
This is a great example of why we don't pull passages out of scripture.
The one verse is out. That's right.
Because the point is that he goes to a distant country, he goes away from his father's influence, He ends up losing all the money. He becomes a pig feeder, pig herder, which is awful in a Jewish context. And he eventually comes back to his father, and his father welcomes him back. That's the story, as we know it. And so we're going to unpack that and talk a little bit more about that. But let's talk about a couple parts of the story.
Okay.
So the first part of the story that you have to deal with Jesus' audience is the 2/3, 1/3 principle that would be at play with the inheritance. So you have an older brother and a younger brother.
Yes.
So the older son is going to get most of the estate, and the younger son is going to get a lesser amount. This is not 50-50.
No,
they don't do that in
older
their
son gets double portion.
Correct.
Yes.
So that's the first piece.
Yes.
Is the younger son is asking for what is his. Secondly, just like it would be today, this is really rude. This is not done. Shame on our culture. You don't ask for what you're basically doing is you're wishing that this guy is dead.
Yeah.
Like, I wish you would die, but since you're not dying, give me what is owed to me now.
Almost like you're dead to me.
Yeah.
Give me my stuff.
Yeah.
I'm moving on.
Yeah. So this is deeply, deeply offensive. What has happened here.
Well, and I think as you set this up, you see the stage of even the violation of one of the 10 Commandments, honor your father and mother. Right. And Jesus sets a stage of what would be one of the worst things you can do right there is, let me tell you about this guy who completely dishonors in every way you can imagine, not just privately, but in order to accomplish this, everybody is going to know that this son is completely treating his father this way. Yeah. But the crazier part is the father didn't have to allow it.
Yeah.
And the father allows it. And so now you just have this, what's happening? Everyone is not doing what seems to be the right thing to do. This, like, a whole family just fell apart in like 3 sentences right here.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes the end, or what we treat as the end, which is the welcoming back of the son, that much more remarkable.
More beautiful.
But it also casts the father in a very negative light. This whole story, now the father in the story is God, and Jesus is telling this story. But in ancient culture that he's talking to, God is not painted in a very positive light to the audience. Yeah. Both because he does say, yes, here's your inheritance. And because of his reaction, shame, honor, remember. So what happens when the son comes back? The son comes back, the father, first of all, runs, which you did not do. Nope. Particularly if you were wealthy and you were older and whatever, that you didn't hurry anywhere. Hurry is for young people and slaves. So he hurries to meet his son. This is the charge of that God is overabundant in his love. In fact, years ago, there was a song that every church in America argued about singing called Reckless Love.
I might be familiar with that one.
Yes, you know that one.
Yes.
Overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And it made people angry that somebody wrote a song that said God's love is reckless. It comes from this.
Yeah, it actually comes from
this is God would open himself up. The Father opens himself up to the charge of being reckless with his. What do you mean you welcome the son? Do you know what he did to you? What do you mean you welcome him back into the family? Are you crazy? That's the recklessness piece. So without weighing in on whether we should sing the song or not, I don't want to, re-spark that whole ridiculousness.
Time is come and gone. We don't have to go there now.
Right.
That's right. But along with that same piece, as far as the phrase that jumps out to me is, what did the father do? He had compassion.
Yeah.
the exact opposite emotion every other person in there is feeling as they're listening to the story. They are angry.
Sure.
They are, what is going on? This guy's coming back. As Jesus is telling the story, you can imagine, because the kid's humbled now, right?
Right.
So that he's in slop, he's eating, he's at his worst spot. And you got to put yourself in your audience. You're hearing this first time. Yeah, that guy's got what he's deserved.
Right.
Oh yeah. Now he's got to go back to dad. After he shamed dad the way he did, he's gonna open up right now and let the kid have it.
Yeah.
That's what everyone's wanting in that moment.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you hear the father sees and has compassion.
Yeah.
At the end of that period, I just imagine Jesus pausing.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, whoa, this ain't right.
Yeah.
No, but this is not where you have compassion.
Yeah.
And the conflict ensures even more inside them.
This is a terrible story.
This is a terrible story.
Yeah.
What is going on? Stop the presses right here. Like this shouldn't, the feeling is we know the end of the story. So we like the compassion, but that moment, someone's like, this should not happen.
Yeah.
This feels wrong. Why is it happening this way? Someone's getting away with something that feels evil.
So I want to talk a little bit, we're going to talk about this in the message, and I just want to unpack it a little bit more here, because I think there's some questions that are going to come out of it. And I do want to read the portion where the younger son is in this foreign country dealing with the pigs, and he realizes, like, what am I doing? I could have a better life because my father's servants are being treated better than I'm being treated here. And so verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food? And here I am dying of hunger. So I'll get up, go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. That part is true. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers. So what he does in this moment, how we're going to describe this, is he makes an agreement with something that is not true. He is still his father's son. He may have done something that culturally would be seen as not being worthy, but he is still his father's son. So what he does in this moment in making an agreement, so let's think back to Jesus in Matthew telling his disciples to agree together in prayer, right? He says, whenever you were there, you agree together in prayer. There's power in that. Well, why? Sometimes we're praying for something. Yeah. I'll add my prayer to yours. You'll add your prayer to mine. And you'll say, like, I just agree with Steve about that. And I add my prayer to that, whatever it is, whatever the language is.
It's like we're lifting together now.
Together. Yeah. There's an agreement in that.
Yes.
So we have talked a lot in the past about how we, as human beings, we live in this physical world, but there's a spiritual world behind the physical world. And we have to be very careful what we agree with. And because what we do is, without knowing it, we can make these little spiritual contracts and sign on them when we agree with them, and they become reality in our lives. And so he makes this agreement where he says, I'm not a son anymore. I'm a servant. I'm not worthy of anything. I'm not worthy of being a son. I'm not worthy of being treated well. I'm not worthy. He makes an agreement. That's a spiritually powerful thing. And until he returns to his father breaks that agreement and says, no, absolutely not. So examples of this in our lives are this. There are people who have grown up believing that they are less than, worthless, the worst kid in the family, the black sheep, the whatever. They've labeled themselves, or they have been labeled this, and they have agreed with it. And so now this has become reality. They function under this as their reality.
It's the idea of taking on a false spiritual identity.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the idea. And we make these agreements all the time without thinking them through. We have to be very careful. Now we can break spiritual agreements in the name of Jesus, but we have to know where they are. So there are oftentimes we will deal with people in a pastoral setting who have been laboring under a certain set of assumptions or whatever it is, and then something happens and they're able to break free from that.
You know, to just paint a picture of kind of how this plays out in the spiritual world is we are wrestling through these things. And I'm going to use a silly example, but I think it's also a little reality. It's almost like the two pieces on the shoulder, and the Holy Spirit's like, here's the truth. Here's the truth. And when we make agreement with the truth of the Spirit, we take on truth. We take on that identity. Yeah. But when I allow the other voice, the voice of the enemy, the voice who wants to break this relationship I have with the Spirit of God, and that becomes an identity. I've now chosen to embrace a lie, and I'm now forming identity and forming even maybe theology or the pictures of God or pictures of myself all around a lie. And this is where this battle goes back and forth. And so when people come to our office, what are we doing? We're like, what made you believe that? And they make a statement, and we struggle sometimes understanding where that even came from. Like, that feels so far from the truth of who I know God reveals himself to be in the word, or who God says you are. And then they begin to tell you, and you're like, it started with that one lie, that one false lie. And they probably never said it to someone. They just, and this is totally a side note, but I think this is so important. This is why it's so dangerous with the just me and God narrative in our spiritual lives. Because not only do I need people to speak truth to me, I need people to say, that is a lie. That's not God. That's not what God would say to you right now. I don't need church. I don't need community. I need to disagree with what you're agreeing with right now spiritually as well, to challenge that. And it's side piece, but that's how I think a lot of this happens. It's just me. And the lies become very easy to believe.
I spoke to somebody not long ago, and they identified themselves as an adulterer. And I said, wait a second. You've been forgiven by that? Yeah. By God for that? Yes. You've been forgiven by your spouse for that? Yes. Then you stop wearing that t-shirt. Like, that's a terrible shirt to wear. Don't wear that anymore. Don't make an agreement with that. Don't labor under that for the rest of your life as this is who I am. This is my identity. No, it's not your identity. And we do this, and we make there's a negative side. How many people do we know who have been told terrible things from the time they're young, that they're this or they're that, and so they grow up with this false sense of self, not believing that they're worth anything, whatever. But there's another side to that, and that is that we sometimes encounter people who've been told that they're too much. You can do anything. You're just wonderful. You're better than everybody else is. And don't make an agreement with that either. That's not true either. We see this in the pastoral world, where pastors hold themselves above someone else, hold themselves above accountability, above an elder. But I don't really need that. I hear from the Lord. I have the Bible. I have these, so I don't require that. You're making an agreement with something very dangerous, that you are exempt. The Lord has chosen you to be exempt from accountability and from all these things because you're better than everybody else. Don't make an agreement with that.
The way that infects your soul either way becomes a poison that just begins to spread like cancer. But the thing is, as we even think about that, part of the thing that makes this a bit difficult, and we struggle when talking about this, I think even in the church world, is that what once was changes because of who Christ is and what Christ did. Like, there's an element of where I was lost, or I was a sinner. I was far from God. I in my sin rebelled against God. Like, these are all true things, but because of Christ, my worthiness in myself is not what brings me here. The Son did the things that culturally would have said, no, it's cut off. But the merciful, compassionate Father says, but I don't define you by that.
Right.
You've created more identity to that than I'm even wanting to put on you. I have made a way for you to now come back and take on the true identity I created you to have begin with. But you have to reject agreeing with that idea. And embrace what I'm offering you.
And so this is what the Father does. He welcomes him back as a son, not as a hired hand.
Right.
Because when you come close to the Father, when you have the Father's voice in your ear, he's going to speak truth. God is always going to speak truth to us. And so when we have these wacky ideas, or when we have, this is who I am, or this is what I think I'm doing, or this is my new identity, my old identity was a mistake, or, whatever it is. And then when we draw close to God, he's the one who says, why are you making an agreement with that? None of that is true. And that's what he says to the son. None of this is true. He stops him. He doesn't even get through his speech. He's rehearsed this speech. Yeah. And the father cuts him off. He's like, I don't know, whatever that is. That's not here nor there. That's not true. Here's who you are.
Well, and I think that's why he cuts him off there. He's like, yeah, but because you made this about you.
Yeah.
And what's the crazy part of this whole narrative is that the story is really about the fact that the father is still in control.
Yeah.
The father is still, even though he's even distributed his inheritance, the father actually still has control over his inheritance because of the customs and the rules of this day and stuff. So the father's in control. He paints the picture. He's like, I'm stopping you because you've made it about you. I'm not going to define it by you. I'm the one in charge. I'm the one with the power. I make you my son. Enter back to where you belong.
Yeah. So most of us, we kind of stop the story at this point.
Yep.
And with the other two stories, this is where it stops.
Yeah.
We found the coin, we found the sheep, all is well, there's celebration, high fives. But that's not where this story ends. No. Because you have an older brother who is upset. And God, in his wisdom, Jesus adds this little portion that God has welcomed back the rebellious son.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the beginning and remember who Jesus is talking to.
Yes. Scribes and the Pharisees.
The scribes and the Pharisees. Complaining about what?
Welcoming sinners and eating with them. Yeah.
And so that's why Jesus adds this. He adds this little part about you should be happy about this. You should be happy that somebody has been brought back into the family. And instead, you're angry. What is the base of your anger? What is that? What is that about? And so we'll unpack that more on Sunday and talk about some of those things. But that's the idea. So there you go.
Well, one of the pieces, I have no clue if you're going this Sunday. So if I'm now about to take away from your sermon, forgive me.
All right.
But I like this. So I'm going to say it.
No, do it. I may steal it if it's good.
No, that's good. The second son also has kept himself from the father.
Correct.
And the father came out to the son.
Yeah.
The same way the father came out to the other son.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most, you don't hear that talked about much with this parable.
Right.
Abba Father runs back toward the other son. He's rebellious too. Yeah. He's being ridiculous. He's taken on a identity of himself, just like the other son that should never have existed.
Right.
He had defined himself, maybe another agreement of my righteousness makes me worthy of all of this. And I just love how dad comes out when he makes this statement. I'm just going to, son. And I hear just, son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and found. Like, I just hear that same compassion in the father's voice. Yeah, son, you almost like you have been faithful.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's like, but this is the wrong attitude of a faithful son.
And, just the subtle detail of the father going out. Again, when you're important, people come to you. The president of the United States doesn't visit people.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. That's really good.
People come to him.
Yes,
it's not
really
like
good.
The Secretary of State, like he walks down to the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
Everybody comes to you. When you're the king, everybody comes to you. When you're the wealthiest man around, everybody comes to you. You want to talk to your father, you come to him. He doesn't come to you.
Yeah.
And so here twice.
That's right.
God makes the effort to go out and have the conversation.
And it reminds us how God meets us where we're at.
Yeah.
Isn't that the beauty? Like, we are so broken and we just take on this identity, just like the first son. I got to do this and I'll go tell my dad this and I'll make this elaborate speech and I'll do all these things that maybe God will like me again. Maybe then God will be happy. Maybe like I see the sin in my life, but if I have my quiet time for a whole week straight, then I can tell God I'm really sorry because then I've earned myself to have that voice. I've done that to myself.
Yeah.
I feel like I had to earn to come back and like repent.
Yes.
And God's like, not only that, God's already running toward me.
I've been waiting for you the whole time.
Yeah, there's this beautiful song by a band in the 90s called Shaded Red. It's about the prodigal son. I don't know if you know the song, but the chorus says, I saw him run to me. He took me in his arms, put my head to his chest and said, my son's come home again. He looked in my face, wiped the tears from my eyes. With forgiveness in his voice, he said, son, do you know how much I love you? And it says the father caught me by surprise and brought me to my knees because God ran.
Yeah.
I saw him run to me.
Yeah.
I just love that chorus so much. It's just great. The perfect picture, I think, of this parable coming together.
Oh, man, that's good. Let's end there.
I like that.
Yeah. Good. Well, join us next week. The parable next week is we are going to be talking about the parable of the. Do you remember?
I don't. I'm sorry. It's yours.
I know.
I don't remember.
And I swear to you, I was working on it 40 minutes ago.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be really. No, it's the parable of the house divided.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes. Is Jesus doing miracles?
Yeah, the house divided itself cannot stand.
Yeah. Yes. Is Jesus doing miracles in the name of God or in somebody else's name?
It's a really cool section.
Yeah.
It is.
Whew, okay. Man, when is Tammy back?
2 more weeks still. Okay. It's just us next week too.
Oh man. I apologize for that. And but join us next week. We'll talk about that and
we'll even know where the scripture is located next week.
And in honor of Tammy, we say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.